Lab of the future, maximum lab, tomorrow's lab, smart lab. What does that mean? Why is it there? What does it enable from a scientific perspective, from a science perspective? What do we need it to be? When I think of that, I think back to the old scientists, the old inventors, Edison, Curie. And I think, what did they need? Mendel, Fleming. What did they use? What was their inspiration? How did they drive? How did they make? How did they invent? And how did they prove? Which is one of the most important pieces of science. So when you look at those labs of the past, you see dark, dingy, you see parts everywhere, you see Bunsen burners and tubes and pitot tubes and tracks and wires. What was it there for? How did they measure? Well, in Edison's time, he created a lot of things he used in the lab. Most of his inventions are actually the inventions to confirm some of his other greater inventions. So it's interesting. And I think you should look at that and see what was there. And then what drives people to innovate? Where's the creative juice come from? When we think about innovation and bringing people together to create science and deliver value to humankind, really, how do we do that? Is it a construct of people? Is it a leader? Is it the environment around them? I think it's all those things. When we set up new spaces, today, the needs are different than they were in the past. So a young scientist has a different view of the world, has a different precept of technologies, use of technologies, and where that's going to go. So when we think about the creative process, I start with Robert Nathan's construct of the creative process. That process is a Venn diagram that starts at the top with perception. To the right is conception, and to the left is expression. So the idea is the perception of the world is what drives an idea or makes you think. That conception is where you think of what that could be, and the expression is where you actually build it. So from perception to conception is where the analysis is really taking place. From conception to expression is where the design components are. And then to see if the design meant anything, if it made a difference. You take it back to the perception of the world again, and that's where you bring feedback into the design. So you have a loop. But the center of these three circles is really the creative process. That's what we're talking about. So how do you get somebody to be creative? And we think about, okay, we have the creative process, we try to understand it, we'll try to organize to it and find and inspire people. What can we do with the facility? The facility itself, a lab building, a lab facility, and even a campus, all has something to do with whether you walk with a little bit of a jump in your step or you're kind of slunched over walking into work every day. It makes a difference. When we talk about the lab itself, we ought to understand what we're doing in the lab. So there are different types of functional activities from a scientific perspective today. The in silico process, which is, I'm going to model it in a computer. I don't need a wet lab anymore, but I need that space, I need that data, I need a data crunch. A free thinking lab. So I don't really have a perception in mind, but I'm going to work on ideas, see things, and look for tangential issues that might come out and drive invention from there. A campaign lab where we've kind of identified what we're going to do. We need to get through it. We need to drive and improve and prove the idea. Quality assurance gets into the support of manufacturing. Production, of course, in the development lab before full production into the normal space that we consume. And then, of course, stability, the long-term aspects of that product and invention. If we look across those pieces, we've got analytical chemistry, microbiology, we've got automation labs, we've got device labs, we've just got technology labs. So when we look at the intersection between those two spaces, you get different lab constructs that can work for you. The old traditional lab, which is the soapstone top, the gas tubes and valves that would make your Bunsen burner work, the old fume hood, usually in the basement, dingy and cold, or a new, more open concept lab, which is a lab that brings in more light, brings in more people together, more open space, more open bench. It looks a little bit like the hoteling concept in your office today. Then we have Open Access Lab. Open Access Lab is a lab that's dedicated to probably expensive, probably valuable pieces of equipment that are dedicated to a certain type of science. And we're trying to get as much out of it as possible, so you can go in there and say, hey, I want to use this HPLC GC mass spec. I'll sign up for it and I'll use it, and then I'll move on and another scientist would follow in behind me. We have the collaboration lab, so a lab that's really designed not so much for the wet side of the lab activity, but more for bringing scientists together, bringing marketing together with science, bringing sales together with science, some new ideas in the lab construct space today. We have the Flex Lab. Flex Labs are designed to be able to be adjusted over time. They're better for new technologies as they come into play. They're better for changing into tomorrow. They're better for science that's progressing quickly, or different types of science activities as we move forward as well. So you got different ideas and different needs, and how do you fit those together? It's important that you construct the need and the idea, and you look a little bit to tomorrow. Because right now, we're sitting on a lot of old labs. We're sitting on labs that were designed really with the concepts and precepts of the 1950s and 60s. The boom of the 90s, at least in the pharmaceutical world, actually developed a lot of labs from that construct, because they were trying to attract people from universities, and people from universities were sitting on top of old construct labs, and it was familiar. But today, we see a different need. We see new scientists, we see new technologies, we see new ideas of collaboration which didn't exist in the research space before. Ideas and understanding that we can do more with people that have shared ideas and shared invention than we could in the past. So that's what we're looking at, I think, today. From our perspective, we try to map generally ideas. It doesn't matter if they're life sciences ideas or technology, oil and gas, whatever they might be. We map them across what we call a roadmap. And that roadmap indicates to us, it might be a cultural issue, a social issue, a technology advancement. It might be a problem. It might be one of those external factors that drives you in a different direction. From that general backdrop, we also look at, from a lab space, what can influence labs today? Do-it-yourself health, rise of allergies, rise of chronic disease, aging society, and what kind of activities might change the world of the laboratory concept? Fab labs, 3D printers, bio 3D printers. How can those things change the way we work, the way we invent, and what kind of lab construct needs to support those issues? How do we support collaboration? Do you use Google Glass, Google Glasses? I'm talking to somebody in Asia about an idea, and somebody in Frankfurt, Germany comes up with a solution. It didn't take 5 years, it took 20 minutes. How can we enable all that? So when we talk about building a lab, creating innovation, we have to talk to the people that are in the lab, the scientists. Who are they? So we have to know what a scientist my age needs out of a lab construct, out of the technology, out of the collaborative construct of the lab itself. We have to know what a scientist that's going to graduate tomorrow needs. And those needs are very different. The way those scientists look today at technology, it's just out of hat. They know how to use it, they know where it is, they're very comfortable with it. They're also comfortable sharing ideas. Some of the older guard might be more protective of those ideas and less able to share, less willing to share. But a collaborative process can be much more effective. So how do we build a lab that provides that collaboration, that supports the different aspects of lab activity, that enables technology into the space? We ask those people. So when we asked some young scientists what they needed out of the space, we said, do you need us to help you build your social network? And they said, of course not. I get that in my phone. When I ask an older scientist, is it important? Yeah, it's important that I have the ability to socialize in the lab space as well. When we ask the younger scientists, do they expect new technologies to be available for them to help their science develop? And they said, of course. And when you ask them how quickly they expect it right now. So how are we going to deal with that? What does that mean to us? It might mean, like we talked, Google Glass. It might mean Google Glasses. It might mean collaborative activities with video conferencing. It might be much more in cyclo processing, where we're modeling instead of wet lab activities. It might mean acquiring and positioning newer technologies that have different capabilities, different throughput. This is where we are today. What do we need in the lab? What do scientists expect? What technologies are available? These are the kind of questions we need to be asking. We need to be looking into the future. We need to look at the reality of the lab constructs we have today. And we need to work to fold these together, make our best investment, ask the scientists what they need, look at the science, look at the pressures in the industry and the world. So with that, I'd like to thank you. Appreciate the time you've given me, and hopefully this has been helpful to you.